Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Paige Gordon, who's here to share with us what can food noise teach us about human behavior. So many people assume that struggles with food are simply a matter of willpower. But what if there's more happening beneath the surface? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Author, advocate, and speaker Paige Gordon spent more than 22 years battling bulimia before beginning to ask deeper questions about biology, psychology, and behavioral factors that influence our relationship with food. Today, she serves on the board of directors of the National Eating Disorder Association and advocates for greater understanding of the complex factors that contribute to eating disorders and mental health challenges. So welcome to the show, Paige Gordon.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today and talk to you and your listeners.
Oh my goodness. Well, what a great honor it is to have you here, and not only to talk about your book and your journey and your work, but one of the things I wanted to really dive into is food noise. So many people are not familiar with what that is. Can you share that with us?
Sure. So the answer's gonna depend on who you ask and which line of medicine you're talking to. But food noise, I think that we've heard in the last couple of years anyway, really started to come out with the whole GLP era conversation where people were reporting this nonstop thoughts around food, almost like a compulsion or a drive that really didn't have anything much to do with hunger. And that's where the concept of food noise, I think, came from, at least today. I know in the obesity space now they have two diagnostic survey tools to try to capture that a little bit more. So if you are thinking about it in terms of eating disorder, they might give you a different answer, coming from more of a place of restriction and truly being hungry, because that's also what food noise can mean. But for me, when I'm talking about food noise, I'm talking about the first type, which is this obsession about food that never went off of my mind, no matter what I ate and if I was full and that sort of thing.
So, for our listeners that are new to your journey, can you share that with us?
Sure, yeah. So I'm 44 years old and I've been in recovery from bulimia nervosa for 4 years. And before that, I was really, really sick for 22 years. I started binging and purging when I was around 18. And even before that, I had undiagnosed binge eating disorder, which is where you have moments of binging, but you don't purge. I wasn't diagnosed because binge eating disorder wasn't in the DSM until 2013. So this was in the 90s. But I always just really struggled. And historically, and I was in and out of treatment for most of the time that I was sick. And that other type of food noise that I was mentioning to you comes from the Minnesota starvation diet. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's pretty interesting. Back in the 40s or after World War II, the US realized that we were going to have a bunch of people that were starving and they weren't sure what to do with that. And this was before they even knew about the concentration camps. And so they enrolled 36 males into the study instead of them having to enlist, where they restricted their calorie intake to about half. And what we learned from that is when that happens, all sorts of bad things happen. The wheels completely fall off the bus. You get anxiety, depression. You start presenting with an obsession with food. These people started like recording recipes for food. One person even cut their fingers off. It just is bad news. So from that study, if we had done it today, we would have taken brain scans and that sort of thing, but we didn't have that back in the 40s. But from that came all this work that we learned about what happens when someone restricts. And that is a form of food noise. And that's pretty much the basis of most um, eating disorder therapy, which is that it's coming from a place of restriction. And I think that is true, and that probably is the average. But, for outliers like me, that wasn't the case. I never restricted, and I would eat normal amounts of food, and I still had this compulsion to eat. And it was always explained to me that maybe I was emotionally eating, maybe I was zoning out, and this never resonated and made me feel worse about myself. And so when I started hearing about food noise maybe 4 years ago, I couldn't believe it because I didn't realize that this other type of food noise existed. And what I was hearing from the obesity space is that a lot of people were not restricting and still having a huge amount of obsession with food. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the special snowflake I thought I was. There are other people out here that have this problem that I have. And that's when I really started delving into it more and trying to understand what this other type of food noise might be.
So looking back, I mean, because you start off by saying you believe some of your struggles were dealing with willpower, but looking back,
Mhm.
how has your understanding changed?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I always felt like I was a failure, that if I just kept trying harder, that I should be able to control my urges. But since I started researching more about what food noise is for some people, I really learned more about the brain. And everything that we do, even us talking right now, is a neurological event, right? So, really trying to understand what's going on in the brain when I'm feeling like I'm having compulsion towards eating food, which was almost always ultra processed food, by the way. It wasn't like I was going around binging on a bowl of broccoli. Really trying to understand that. And what I've learned is that ultra processed food, through the work of a man named David West, for your listeners that want to look up this more. Ultra processed food, when eaten at a young age, can cause reward circuitry changes in the brain that actually mimic the behaviors that we saw in that Minnesota starvation diet in adulthood. You almost get sort of addicted to these ultra processed foods. And it changes the reward circuitry in your brain. It changes the way that your brain's functioning. And so there's a difference between liking a food and wanting it. And I was very much stuck in this wanting phase. I could go eat a normal meal and then afterwards I would feel satisfied, but for some reason I'd have a compulsion to eat an entire thing of Oreos, for example. And so that really speaks to that, is this underlying neurological reward circuitry situation that may be going on for a subset of patients, and could explain why in the eating disorder space treatment outcomes are so poor. A recent paper just came out that showed 40 to 55% of people with eating disorders don't respond to treatment. And that number hasn't changed in the last 20 years. And I think it's because we're treating to averages instead of precision medicine. And we're still assuming that everyone's coming from this place of restriction, which I think probably for the most part people are. But there are people like me that do exist that don't fit that model.
I've always found this to be so interesting, especially when we look at these food companies of ultra processed foods or processed foods. And I don't know if most people know, but I mean, they have whole scientific teams that are engineering the foods so people crave it and can't stop eating it.
Yeah, it's really terrible, and it's a little bit confusing for a patient, in my opinion. At least it's been confusing for me because what I just said there about food addiction, it's not in the DSM yet, and it's a controversial topic in the eating disorder space. And so traditionally, when you're in treatment, at least my experience of treatment, both outpatient and inpatient and residential, is no food is bad. You eat everything, and okay, but what if you're actually feeling like you're addicted to to ultra processed food? So there it's not settled yet, I guess is what I'd say. But yeah, it's really interesting when I think about my own lived experience about what I was actually binging on, and it was always ultra processed food. And now, since I've gotten through that and I've done the work, it doesn't even taste good to me anymore. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and I went through McDonald's the other day and I just got like a McFlurry and I had like 3 bites of it and I was like, ugh, this tastes like chemicals. Like, what was I doing? How did I used to eat 10 of these in a sitting? It just shows you, it showed me anyway, just what was going on in my brain that I really was having something going on there with a compulsion.
Yeah, it's just so crazy how that ends up working. I know I haven't been on sugar in a while, and I could taste sugar even in bread. And so it's so
Exactly.
we become
Yeah.
hypersensitive to all of the things that I mean, I think in many ways we in some ways should be avoiding a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, in the eating disorder field, I think they would say we shouldn't be avoiding any food groups, so it's like it's a contentious topic, which is also good science because if we go back to like averages and what is a typical eating disorder, there's in the early 2000s is when we came out, this guy named Chris Fairburn came out with sort of the basis of how we understand eating disorders and how they should be treated. But really, his idea is that they all have something in common, which is like an obsession with body, an obsession with food and rigidness around food, a couple other things. And so to really get out of that, you have to sort of push yourself into just not thinking that way and not being rigid around food. So I don't want to say that that model doesn't work because it does for a lot of people, but for other ones like me that don't fit that model, that there's that other thing going on. So and we just need more, I guess we need precision medicine in the field more because I think what we have is a bunch of symptoms that are presenting as the same thing that have different biological drivers, and trying to figure that out is the really tricky part.
So many people blame themselves when they're struggling with food and habits
Mhm.
or behavior. Why do you think that self-blame is such a common response? And what are the consequences of that mindset?
Hmm. Well, I can talk about myself. And so every time I was in treatment and I kept failing, I hear often from other people in the same boat as me is that like, oh, no one could have tried harder to get well than me. And I resonate with that. I tried so hard. I was always the one that was raising my hand to go into treatment. I was always the one that was doing things, and I just kept on failing. And the information that they were telling me didn't resonate with my lived experience. And instead of questioning the model, I questioned myself. And it made me feel more crazy, more out of my own body, more sick. I was like, wow, I must be worse off. I must be like the most sick person. I don't even know I'm eating this. Like they're telling me that I'm emotionally eating right now, but it doesn't feel like I am. So self-blame and self-hate to me led to pretty much hating myself and isolating myself for a number of years, thinking that I was basically like, I don't know, something that could a disease that would rot anyone that touched it, instead of possibly questioning the model. I always thought it was my fault. And as soon as I started questioning the model, because I had this breakthrough treatment for myself, and I thought, no, something must be going on. Something else must be going on here because how did this work for me? That's when really the healing came, when I started doing my own research and advocating for myself. So,
Well, in your work and book, you've said that curiosity was more helpful than self-judgment in your healing journey. What do you mean by that? And how can people apply that concept into their own lives?
yeah, thank you for asking that. So I just think in general, we need more curiosity in the field and for ourselves. So I came from a world where I was in leadership, and I look back at the way that I treated myself with me failing over and over again and falling on my face. And I'm like, would I ever treat one of my employees like this, the way that I treated myself in terms of like, keep doing what you're doing, keep getting what you're getting? But that's what I did to myself. So I think the moment that I decided to be curious is when I really had a breakthrough because it took it out of it being my fault and really took it into trying to understand the biology and the neurology and how the brain works and how the frontal cortex works and how the amygdala works. And that was really validating for me. For a long time, I never wanted to go there. Like, I have a trauma history, for example, and I was like, oh, I don't want to talk about that because that feels like victim mentality to me. I need to get over it. But the truth is, like, that did actually impact the way my brain grew. And the more that I was curious about that, and the more that I really tried to understand that the best that I could, the less shame I had about my behaviors, and I had more understanding and compassion for myself.
That sounds like such a big piece. And it's so interesting. I mean, I just love your book and the work that you do in showing people a new way. What can food noise teach us about human behavior on a more broad scale, not just around food, but around habits and motivation and self-control?
Oh, I think it's all, like I said, the conversation you and I are having right now is a neurological event, right? So I think humans have a lot less willpower than we realize. If you talk to a neuroscientist about habits and behavior, we're a lot less in control than when we would like to admit. So I think food noise is probably an example of that, especially since we've had the onset of GLPs that some people report is like helping them with compulsive behavior and addictive like things. That's showing us that something is going on that's separate from willpower. So it affects everything. Everything has context. So, you have an event and then it's the contents that you're in it that affects your behavior always.
Well, and so let's just dovetail this with your book, Searching for Full How GLP-1s Changed My Eating Disordered Life.
Mhm.
How did that, using a GLP-1 really impact your life?
Oh, I'm living a bonus life right now because I take a low dose GLP medication to treat my dysregulated eating. Um, so it impacted in every single way. So before, if I went to a friend's house to eat dinner, and that would be a high stress, uncomfortable situation for me. I wouldn't have enjoyed it at all. I would have been obsessed over what I was eating, when I could eat, when I could go purge. I wouldn't have been satisfied just with a normal size. I would have wanted, if there was dessert, I would have wanted to eat everyone's dessert. I almost like kind of turned into like a food vampire, is the way that I can describe it to you. Now, post low dose GLP, and I should tell your listeners that since I've been on this medication, I have not lost any weight. I use this medication in a very different case use than what is typical. But I, I I do what I could describe as the most intuitive eating that I could ever imagine for myself. So that same situation where I'm down at a friend's house for dinner is I'm able to actually focus on what people are saying. I'm actually able to enjoy the food without it causing anxiety. I'm able to eat an appropriate portion size and actually truly feel satisfied for the first time in my life. I'm able to eat a more variety of foods because I don't have to worry about them triggering a binge episode. I mean, I couldn't be more intuitively eating if I wanted to, now that I'm taking something that's corrected, in my opinion, a dysregulated reward circuitry biological issue going on in my brain.
So, how does shame and self criticism affect our ability to make positive changes, regardless if we're dealing with food, mental health challenges, or maybe even personal struggles?
Yeah. So I never told anyone that I was sick with bulimia for the most part because I didn't see um, a light at the end of the tunnel because I kept failing and I thought like, wow, if I tell anyone this, they're gonna there's no solution to be had. So I should just keep this a secret. And that caused a lot of shame. I basically was living my life as a lie. And when I found my solution for a treatment, it wasn't a cure, but it was a treatment with GLP, I started being vocal about it. And actually, the first person I told was actually researchers, not my husband. But slowly but surely, because I saw a light at the end of the tunnel, I felt empowered to share my story. And that was like, it was just one thing at a time. And I feel like that actually was more healing than actually stopping the behaviors, is learning to be honest about my history and letting go of the shame and learning that the world wasn't going to fall apart if I was honest to people about my history with the eating disorder. Because look, I have a really stigmatized disease. And on top of that, I take a really stigmatized treatment. It's like not fun. But for me, I found owning it and being honest about it is a much better place than hiding in shame because that just festered and contributed to my eating disorder.
So, after living with an eating disorder for more than 2 decades, what lessons did you learn about resilience and rebuilding trust with yourself?
I think it had to do, the lessons that I've learned the most is that I have something valuable to bring to the table. So, what I mean by that is, and everyone does with lived experience, in my opinion. One of the papers that I think I referenced that has recently come out that talked about how dire treatment outcomes are, they try to get into like why that's happening. And one of them is that we're treating to averages. Another one is weight bias, which is so real. We live in a world that's obsessed with thinness and that has judgments on people in larger bodies, which is a huge problem. But the other one that they pointed out, one of the bigger ones, is that we need more people with lived experience at the table when we're talking about treatment and how to come up with solutions. And so I've just learned that I actually have value in this discussion. I mean, for a while when I was talking to all these researchers, I kind of felt like I walked into academia like through an air vent or something and like wound up in the room. And I'm like, how did I get here? Like, why are these people listening to me? But over the past 2 years, I've realized I'm a valuable asset to the field because they need people with lived experience and they need to hear what I'm saying. And that's been really healing for me. I felt a sense of purpose, I guess you could say.
So, can you share with us your work that you're doing through the National Eating Disorder Association? I mean, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people still have about eating disorders?
Hmm. Thank you. So yeah, I recently joined the National Eating Disorder Association, and it's a wonderful organization. I joined them because they're one of the only organizations in the United States that actively funds research funding for eating disorders. So I think that's important, the work that they're doing. So I would say, first of all, some of the biggest misconceptions is that people don't necessarily understand that for the most part, these diseases are biological in nature. So you have something that makes you predisposed to an eating disorder, and then you have an environmental trigger. It could be hormones in puberty, or it could be the society that we live in that's obsessed with thinness and social media and all that sort of thing. But there's a trigger. So, because not everyone that's exposed to those things gets an eating disorder. And so I think there's a really big misconception that they're a vanity issue or that they're a choice or that they don't have the effects on the brain that they do, but that it's really rooted in biology. And there's some wonderful work out of a lady's lab, Cindy Bulick, has done a lot of work on the genetics of eating disorders, specifically with anorexia nervosa, and it's quite compelling there. So I would say that, and that they're not new. Anorexia is not a new disease; it's been around for a very long time. Additionally, I would say that all eating disorders aren't the same. Even in the categories that we have, like the typical ones that people think of are anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, there are others. But even within that, it's really more like a spectrum. And so because of that, you're going to have a lot of different responses to treatment, and we can't really talk in generalities for the most part. I think those would probably be the biggest ones. And then, oh, sorry, there is one more, I suppose, that I should point out. It's just how underfunded eating disorders are and how we really don't understand them that well because of it. So it's pretty dire compared to other mental health issues. The way that eating disorder research has been funded has left a huge gap in knowledge. We're really like 20 or 30 years behind in understanding them, which the good news is that there's a huge opportunity there if we can get more investment into it. So that's that. So that's some of the work I'm doing at NIDO too, is advocating for more funding so that we can fund more researchers doing this amazing work to understand the underlying mechanisms of eating disorders and that sort of thing.
So, if someone feels trapped by food noise and unhealthy eating patterns, what's the first place that they can start?
Oh, I would push them to our NEDA, the National Eating Disorder Association's website. We have a wonderful survey that anyone can take that's private, and it will kind of, you can go through a series of questions, and it will kind of give you some clues and let you know if you have a reason to seek some help, and then it can point you in the right direction on getting some support. So that's where I would start.
And where can people connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your book?
Thank you. I'm on LinkedIn, just with my name, Paige Gordon. I post mostly more academic stuff there. I'm also on Instagram, Paige Gordon Author. And then I also have a website, paigegordonauthor.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody. If you agree with me, if you don't, especially if you don't agree with me, I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I just want discourse and having open conversations with people.
Well, Paige, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for our talk.
Well, thank you, Paige. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about what can food noise teach us about human behavior. Also, make sure to check out her book, Searching for Full: How GLP-1s Changed My Eating Disordered Life. Available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.